exactly like that. But hopefully you can follow through and understand that the body of work that was done here was commensurate with the needs that we have of removing those technological obstacles to achieve the advancement being sought. Now, understanding the fact that we typically have SRED occurring within a business environment is key. An SRED project scope within a business project model, as we've shown here, shows that there's an SRED project within the larger business project, and that the core SRED work is what's really important here. I often like to suggest that you need to look at what the heart of what it is that operates your machine or your process. And if you change the function of that, you will ultimately change the operational capabilities. And I know it's never that easy, but that ultimately becomes the core. And that is where your advancement statement lies, is within the core. Now, surrounding that, there's often necessary and eligible work done by engineers, done by external contractors, done by individuals that if there was no core SRED work, it would just be routine engineering or routine support work that you normally do every day. But because it supports an SRED core activity, then it's an eligible amount of work, and of course the costs associated with that can then be claimed. So we're looking at, say, 3 different activities here. They all overlap somewhat, and they're all internal to one large business project. Now, the project model itself. If we want to understand how it relates to industry and business in general, there is a motivation. There's an objective, a business objective that requires some market research. And the research itself defines whether or not you want to pursue this business objective or not. If you choose to pursue it, there's likely to be, again, we're talking about an SRED eligible project here. Lots of projects occur in business where there is no SRED, but on one that has it, there will be an SRED portion that you see here now in blue. And what that really is the section that we just discussed in those 3 areas. The objective, your hypothesis, which outlines your advancement statement and the obstacles that you are facing in order to achieve that advancement. The experimentation portion, that again is systematic in its fashion, where you're investigating the iterative methods and ways to overcome those obstacles to ultimately achieve that advancement. In the end, you're achieving an advanced technology or process or product, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a method of doing something. Whatever your industry is, whatever project you're working on, these are the 3 things, or the 3 areas that comprise the SRED eligible work. Now, external to that work is support individual support work done by people that are external to your group. And these people then supplement those 3 boxes with cost. Ultimately, the cost is really the work that they're doing that you may not have in-house. So everything inside the blue then becomes the eligible work. Now, once you've achieved the advanced technology, you pop out of the box, you've got yourself a product or system that again may still require some support work, but ultimately you're ready to go commercial and use it to earn more income for your business, which is really the thrust behind everything that you're doing here. Now, what expenses qualify? Very, very important. This is where you get paid. The wages and labor. Typically, this is 85%, maybe even 95% of claims that are submitted annually on the SRED program. Now, with every wage dollar that's claimed, you get to claim an overhead, which is called a proxy method, of 65% of the total labor. So, as an example, you find $100,000 worth of eligible labor expenditure over all the people involved on all the projects that you found. You can then ante that up by another $65,000 to cover all of your overheads, power, water, gas, certain individuals in the operation that are necessary but are not doing SRED work, such as front-end staff that are answering phones, some of your accounting individuals, et cetera, et cetera. Materials is another area. Consumed or transformed materials. Contract costs, consulting costs. Again, these are Canadian corporations only. Very, very important there. You have to be a CCPC, a Canadian private tax-paying corporation, in order to, number one, qualify for the program, but also to be a contractor or consultant for someone who is doing SRED. Now, you can buy materials, though, from anywhere in the world. That's not a problem. Capital equipment used, all or substantially all, that's what ASA stands for SRED purposes. Now, the other thing is equipment or leases, rentals, things that you may need but may never want to buy. Also, there's a third-party payment plan, and that essentially is if someone is doing research, such as an institution or a think tank, a research farm, and what they're researching could benefit your entire industry, and through that new development that they're doing, your business could be advanced in terms of the number of products or services you can provide. You may, in kind, supply your time or materials or some sort of expertise to that organization. You are eligible to claim those costs for the activities that they're doing, and that is called third-party payment. Now, on the labor side, directly engaged. These are hands-on activities which include preparing experiments for experimentation or analysis, the actual experiment or analysis, support work of engineering design, operations research, mathematical analysis, computer programming, data collection, testing, or psychological research, technological feasibility studies, technical documentation for internal use. Now, that isn't a manual on how to run your product or your process, but it's the documentation that highlights all the work that was done in order to collect all the information that you're working on your SRED project. Now, for supervisors, hands-on activities that we just discussed, plus directing the technical course of a project, supervision of employees, doing SRED work, technological planning, such as planning for assignment of personnel, job priorities, development of technological strategies, the quality of material being used. And there's another long list that we don't have here of things that qualify for labor individuals. Now, material and prototype expenditures. Materials must be rendered useless in a project to be qualifiable. A prototype is defined as a basic experimental model with the essential characteristics of the product or process. Again, it's used to test the feasibility of the concept, and it's not for sale or subsequent use in the business, and otherwise would be deemed to have 10% scrap value. And again, solely used for experimental purposes. Now, materials and prototypes, indicators of those would be non-standard material being used. Building using methods not practical for commercial production. And of course, the labor cost of a copy is always going to be less than the copy of a prototype. An indicator that a machine is not a prototype or eligible material expense would be the unit is sold, or there's evidence the sale was intended during the construction. In other words, if you have a PO for the product, that it is showing evidence that you have a sale that is intended to occur once it's constructed. So therefore, it would not be a prototype eligible expenditure. After testing, the unit is put in a saleable state, or it's used for a marketing demonstration or trade show. A custom product development. The company must retain intellectual property rights. This is really important on a custom product. And what it really defines is the fact that the SRED started with your company, and it wasn't with the company in which you've contracted to do some work for you. So IP is really important. And it's also important if you are planning to do SRED work that you try to have contracts that define what the expectations are for contract, and I guess we'll call them external sources. The company must be paid to supply an end product, not paid for the development costs. Project must further the company's knowledge base or used to expand the business, and must have all three eligible criteria. Now, a process equipment design or custom product. The equipment developed will be sold or used in commercial production. We want to state that up front. Prior to construction, though, the SRED eligible work would be all the costs associated with the design of the equipment, such as calculations, drafting, etc., maybe sourcing. Again, this is all typically labor. Now, when construction begins, the commercial component will be the labor to build the equipment as it was intended. The SRED component is materials that are used up in the experimental testing during construction, and all the labor for experimental testing and rework or redesign of the machine. Again, the last commercial component, though, would be the material that is sold or used commercially. So you can see there's a need to extract the commercial from the SRED on projects. Now, the beginning and end points of a project. When technological obstacles are identified, this is typically the start of a project. Now, prior to that, there could be some concept development time, which we often suggest we want to include as well, because oftentimes you're struggling with which direction to head in your technology. And you're actually also defining your obstacles in that period. Now, the end point of a project is the advancement has been achieved. Your obstacles have been overcome. The onset of commercial production has occurred, or a project has been abandoned. Now, sometimes you've got a project that has to get out into the field because there was no physical way to ever test it in-house. And therefore, the commercial unit that was sold needs to go through a field or trial process period. If that is the case, the most important thing you need to do is to stay with that product. You need to analyze what's occurring. You need to collect data. You need to monitor it. You need to remain in contact with what is happening with your technology on that project until you're at the point where you're comfortable with it, and then you want to proceed with full-scale production. Now, technical description, just a little bit on this. It involves an identification of the project, which requires an advancement statement. We only have 350 words. Some obstacles, again, only 350 words. The work done needs to be in chronological format, and we'd like to try and highlight milestones. We only have double that amount, 700 words. And again, then there's some additional information, and then of course the costs, which are again those labor, contract, materials, and capital, other things. Those are what make up the overall project that we complete and submit. Lastly, just a brief summary again of the three most important things, which is an advancement statement that clearly identifies what you're trying to improve and advance from a baseline technology for your business. And with that, what are those obstacles, those unknowns, and those roadblocks in your technology that require you to pursue an experimentation process that is systematic in nature, where you're collecting information, you're analyzing that information, you're arriving at new conclusions that you can apply to improve or advance the technology of your process or product. Those are the three key things that we want to look at. And if you can look through the projects that you've got and identify things that come close to meeting this, or you're maybe not quite sure, then we'll move forward from there, and we'll involve our individuals to help clearly identify if they do or do not have the necessary criteria. And this basically brings our presentation to a close. And again, SRED Automation is a technology-driven group that are experts in trying to help you identify projects for your company so that you can recover